Ladies and gentlemen, hello there. You are watching L24 special coverage streaming live from the capital Algiers. Tonight's show is devoted to the latest development marking the Palestinian occupied territories following the recent storming and attack perpetrated by the Zionist forces against Al-Aqsa Mosque and Palestinian worshippers who were performing the Ramadan prayers. The Zionist incursions into the Palestinian holy shrines has become a tradition, especially in the fasting month of Ramadan, as Zionist forces stormed on Tuesday and Wednesday Al-Aqsa Mosque and brutally assaulted Palestinians, worshippers, and arrested hundreds of them. As a matter of fact, the Zionist occupation's strategy aims to obliterate the identity of the Holy Mosque and deprive it from its Islamic and Arab nature, in addition to preventing Palestinians to perform their religious rituals. The international community continues to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to all the violations and exactions the Palestinian people are subject, confirming yet again their double standard policy. To this end, multiple questions comes to the scene. What is the aim behind these Zionist attacks on Palestinians during the holy month of Ramadan? Is it to defy the holy Al-Aqsa Mosque, or to debone the criminal Netanyahu, who is trying to drag the region toward more violence to cover the Jewish split inside the occupier entity? How will the Palestinian factions deal with these attacks? And what will be the international community's response to these repeated criminal acts by the same perpetrator? To answer all these questions, I'm joined live by Mr. Salim Break, who is a researcher and political analyst from Haifa, Palestine, and also from Palestine, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum, who is with us, journalist and writer, alongside Mr. Farouk Kasibawi from New Zealand, and a political analyst and a management advisor. Gentlemen, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to this discussion. A short break, and we start our debate. And before we delve into our discussion, let's watch this report by Nabil Khazini concerning this assault by the Zionist occupation.
It all started as a peaceful night, as usual, during a holy month of compassion for Muslims. However, that quiet night was turned into this. The occupation forces made the moments of worship moments of violence and aggression after they raided Al-Aqsa Mosque.
I was praying and I was sitting on a chair reciting the Quran. They had stun grenades. One of them hit my chest. Now my family will see me and they will feel terrible.
We were spending the night in the mosque, and after we were done with late night prayers, the police started to evacuate worshippers from the outdoor yards. We were inside and the young man closed the doors, but they stormed in and detained the young man and women. There were other worshippers to the eastern part of the mosque.
This is the second night that dozens of heavily armed Zionist forces stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque, stopping around 20,000 of worshippers from performing night prayers in what is considered Islam's third holiest sites. The attacks caused around 200 injuries among the worshippers, some of which were serious. But just watch this. The scale of violence was so high. The occupation forces used concussion grenades, tear gas canisters and rubber-coated steel bullets as a means to forcefully expel the Palestinian worshippers, including even kids, from their mosque.
Al-Aqsa Mosque, despite all what is going on, is purely for Muslims and cannot be shared. Everything that is going on and happening by force will never be legitimate.
After expelling the worshippers, settlers stormed the Al-Aqsa Esplanade under heavy security from the Zionist occupation forces. In the aftermath of the targeting of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, clashes erupted in various parts of the West Bank. Occupation forces bombed a site southwest of Gaza City. They stoked fears of further violence.
And Mr. Tariq Abu Azzoum, since you are in Palestine, I'll be starting with you. So how are the conditions now in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and what does the security situation look like there?
Hello, dear, again. Generally, since the formation of the recent Israeli hardline government, the situation in the Palestinian territories has definitely intensified in a very negative way that could entirely impacted on the Palestinian conditions inside the Palestinian territories generally and in the holy places in particular. For the second night in a row, the Israeli occupation forces tried to assault and brutally attack Palestinian worshippers inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound generally, especially in the early hours of the night, because they would like generally to pave the way and to give a green light for the Israeli settlers next morning in order to storm Al-Aqsa Mosque and trying to make a deep status quo changing inside the Palestinian territories and inside the condition of Jerusalem city in particular. And during their stormings, they try as much as possible to harm Palestinians worshippers in order to force them to leave Al-Aqsa Mosque and never again come back to the to pray in this holy place. Simply during the last couple of days, the Israeli occupation forces have tried as much as possible to put new case and to put new restrictions on the arrival of Palestinian worshippers inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. But in spite of these obstacles and limitations and restrictions, the Palestinian worshippers, they seeked as much as possible in order to get and to have an access to the Palestinian holy sites. The occupation state generally tries to create a new condition for Palestinians, which is trying to make a proper division in time and place for the holy places inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. They try to make new changes in terms of the conditions inside the holy places, which gives a green line for the Israeli settlers to share the Palestinians and Muslims generally in the rituals and in performing rituals inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Actually, today's assaults for the second day is much greater than yesterday, which the number of Palestinians who were generally arrested till this moment has crossed 500 Palestinians. 400 of them were generally and critically injured by the occupation forces, who just did not respect the value of this place for more than 1.7 billion Muslims around the world. And actually, this is such a great violation to the feelings and emotions of Palestinians who cannot really stand idly by regarding this violation.
Mr. Tariq, staying with you, renewed incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque and expelling of worshippers by force. What does this indicate according to you and in your opinion? Is this something considered as an act of international law violation?
Simply, yes. Because since the formation of the recent Israeli hardline government, they did not even give attention to any of the principles of the international law, and even they ignored and gave a cold shoulder to the demands of international and regional actors not to change the status quo inside this holy place and these holy places. And they are trying as much as possible to pass their schemes throughout the use of the extremist figures included in this government, like the Israeli National Security Prime Minister, who overly supported the stormings, and besides the statements that have been released by the Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, who overly called for the destruction of Palestinians, and even he called for wiping out the Palestinian existence from these places and from the Palestinian land generally. Actually, these incursions and these violations that have been made against Palestinians are paving the way for a new generation, a new era that Israel is trying to impose over Palestinians. But generally, these conditions cannot be passed easily, and even cannot be done with the great and the intensifying number of worshippers and the Palestinian determination to protect the holy places and even not to change the status quo in their territories.
Very good indeed. Coming to you, Mr. Farouk Kasibawi, in your opinion, what is the reason for this campaign of daily raids, incursions and arrests against the defenseless Palestinians?
First and foremost, thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on the generous months of Ramadan. I would like to start with addressing the elephant in the room, which is the Israeli protests and the Jewish violence that is happening between the two parts of the political array in Israel. This has started and continued since the beginning of January, since the 7th of January, and then every Saturday it has escalated as a confrontation between the left and the right in the Jewish entity or the Zionist entity on the Palestinian land. This is a usual rhetoric, or it has become the signature of Benjamin Netanyahu every time he is stuck politically in any kind of a confrontation with his opposition. He uses the Palestinians as a pawn in his confrontation, and he raises the rhetoric of racist and fanatical Jewish beliefs that are enticed and then turned into violence against civilians, against innocents. The issue that we're facing is that the Palestinians are the cheapest commodity that is being traded between the Israeli political factions. It is sad to see that every time Benjamin Netanyahu is stuck in creating a government, uses Israeli or Jewish fanatics to push a rhetoric of end of days and to push a rhetoric of storming the mosque is something that they have been trying to do since the establishment of their entity, and until today they test the waters in every Ramadan to see if the Palestinian zeal is still strong, if the Islamic zeal is still strong, if the humanitarian zeal is still strong.
Mr. Farouk, staying with you, the most important question that it should be raised this time, why the Zionist entity insists on continuing this violation and provocations still in this blessed month of Ramadan? Why they couldn't use another month probably? Why Ramadan is kind of used for this matter?
It serves a fuel to the fire of hatred that they are trying to promote for their people. It serves as a rhetoric of using religion in politics. This is a Jewish way of doing things, a Zionist way of doing things. Over the last 1400 years, we as Muslims and as Muslim politicians, as Muslim scholars in any political scene, Muslims have been faced by Jewish politicians that are using religion, a perverted religion and perverted religious beliefs to further their political agenda. What we are seeing there is using the emotions of ignorant Jewish people, of used Jewish people, of pawns in the Jewish scene, turning them into Zionists, feeding their hate, asking them to disrespect the holiest months for the Muslims in order to create as much media coverage as possible to cover what is currently happening, part of the corruption that is happening in their government, part of their issues that are being faced between their left and right. I don't want to turn this into an Israeli political scene analysis as much as understanding the reason behind the hatred, the reason for all these armed militias that are imported from different countries around the world to come from Jewish youth to come to Jerusalem to serve in their holy war against Muslims, against civilians, against women and children that are peacefully worshiping their God. This is something that has been used over the years several times, and Ramadan provides the highest pressurized environment for this to blow up and become newsworthy.
Thank you, Mr. Farouk, for this explanation. Coming to you, Mr. Abu Azzoum, there are many Palestinians calls to protect and defend Al-Aqsa Mosque from these violations. To what extent do you think that these warnings will deter the Zionist settlers from repeating night raids on Al-Aqsa?
Generally, the occupation and the Zionist settlers, they are really insisting on provocating and storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they are trying as much as possible to provocate Muslims generally and Palestinians. And they would like to say for the international community and for the entire world that Jerusalem is for Israelis, not for Palestinians. And as Palestinians, we have the right to defend our holy places, especially Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is considered to be the holiest third shrine for over than 1.7 billion Muslims around the world. And to know more about the stormings, every day we have regular stormings in Al-Aqsa Mosque, so that we have a great number of settlers who provocate and are storming Al-Aqsa Mosque on a daily basis. And they are trying as much as possible to indicate that we have the right in this place, not for Palestinians, but they cannot do that suddenly, but they are trying to do that in different occasions and in different situations, that they are trying in which they are trying to do much pressure and to exert much pressure on Palestinians. Palestinians cannot really confront these violations and these stormings unless they are trying to intensify their existence in Al-Aqsa Mosque, because when they just join to pray and to perform their praise, they are trying to stay in Al-Aqsa Mosque, giving a sign for the Israeli occupation, for the Israeli settlers, that this place is for Palestinians. But actually, how can the Israeli occupation forces back the way for settlers in order to enjoy the stormings of Al-Aqsa Mosque? They are trying to clear the Al-Aqsa Mosque from Palestinians by attacking them, by intimidating Palestinians, by arresting them, by kidnapping, by having such critical injuries in their bodies. And they are trying even to force Palestinians to write down and to resign on papers that really can expel them and to keep them away from Al-Aqsa Mosque for more than 7 months, actually. So I think these policies that have been made by the Israeli occupation forces can really facilitate the process of the stormings of Al-Aqsa Mosque. So I clearly think that the existence and intensifying number of worshippers inside our holy places is the best solution in order to confront the Israeli violations and the stormings, in order to change the status quo in the region.
Perfectly understood. It's all about intensifying the number, and Al-Aqsa will be always belonging to Palestine and all Muslims. So, in the same line of thought, and earlier we had a phone call with the Palestinian ambassador to Algiers, Mr. Faiz Abu Aida, asking about what should be done and how to stop this continuous aggression against Palestinian people and the sanctities which belong to all Muslims. And he said the following:
a continuous, barbaric attack from the right-wing extremist government, which is made up of extremists within the Zionist entity. They therefore target the existence of the Palestinian people and its sanctities, and they want to impose a fait accompli on the Arab and Islamic nation by ending the Islamic, Palestinian, and Arab existence in this holy city. But this is impossible. They were upset with seeing, during the sacred month of Ramadan, tens of thousands of Palestinians praying and worshipping in a clear message that this holy and blessed mosque belongs to the Islamic and Arab nation, and the Palestinian people could never relinquish it, and could never allow the evil schemes of the government of Netanyahu and Ben Gvir to be successful, whatever the price.
So, coming to you, Mr. Kasibawi, so taking the word from an official, according to these schools of the scene in the occupied territories, explosion may occur at any moment, but the extremism of Zionist entity increases due to the restrictions imposed. What are the reactions of the resistance right now?
We expect escalation. I personally expect the Palestinian resistance to start firing from Gaza. I expect the violence to be escalated because it is to the benefit of all parties involved. Notice that the Jewish settlers want to increase the violence. Notice that the Jewish government or the Zionist entity government wants to escalate the violence, because every time they get into a violent confrontation with the civilians in Palestine land, they end up removing civilians either by killing them, by arresting them, or by removing houses or finding reasons, no matter how untrue they are, to remove people or to gain more lands. Unfortunately, we will also see that there are a lot of entities that are not truly behind or supporting the Palestinian and the Islamic resistance in that land, trying to regain our land and our mosque. Unfortunately, we will see a lot of untrue supporters that are using this incident to increase their profile internationally. We will see a lot of countries that are not necessarily in support of the Islamic resistance in Al-Aqsa in Palestine. We will see that a lot of people that are not in support of that, we will try to act as mediators between all the factions. As usual, we will hear a lot of empty words, but we will not see any actions. The increase, the raise of the level of violence, the frequency of stormings are beneficial to all parties involved. Therefore, I estimate that they will continue, and we will see a lot more intense confrontations on the floor of Al-Aqsa.
Mm-hmm. Very good indeed. Coming to you, Mr. Azoum, the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque comes this time in conjunction with the mass protests taking place in the Zionist entity. How can this scene be read? Can we say Netanyahu is trying to cover the split within his government?
Simply, the recent formed Israeli government has been met with a wave of, let's say, contradiction and even condemnation by the occupation communities and settlers. Even inside the occupation state, they have a great rift, by the way, among the fabric of their communities. They really refuse the policies adopted by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and how he can really form the recent Israeli government, which included extremist figures who were classified on the list of terror according to the United States administration. At the same time, the number of Israeli protesters who just backed to streets in order to express the outrage of the Israeli judicial reforms actually that Netanyahu has adopted with cooperation with his ministers inside the government in order to escape from the corruption issues that he had been accused of during his long-serving history as Prime Minister of the occupation state. Actually, Netanyahu did not really expect that the number of protesters and even the range of a protest that Israel has generally witnessed to reach this level. Actually, it was an unprecedented point that the occupation state has really witnessed throughout or since the occupation of Palestinian territories. Actually, Netanyahu now is in a tight corner. He faces such a great pressure from the occupation community and from the occupation street generally inside the occupied Palestinian territories. And at the same time, he'd like to get out from the bottleneck throughout having more pressure on Palestinians in order to satisfy the demands of the right-wing parties in his government, and even as much as possible to get out from this hot water throughout launching a new aggression on the Palestinian holy sites that might really could spark new confrontation with the Palestinian resistance generally, and even with the Palestinian people in the occupied Jerusalem and in occupied West Bank. Actually, Netanyahu now is trying as much as possible to get out from his crisis throughout different approaches. He's trying to achieve fake success in different fronts, by the way, including the Syrian, the Iranian, and even the Palestinian arena. And he is trying to de-escalate the anger of the Israeli occupation street throughout postponing the carrying out the judicial reforms into a later date. But sooner or later, Netanyahu is knowing well how he can practically convince the Israeli street to accept his demands and needs. But if he's going to be in a tight corner and he cannot have any proper solution, he will tend to intensify and exert more pressure on Palestinians in order to pass his schemes.
Very good points you have raised. The pressure will raise. Now, based on the ambassador's words, Mr. Farouk, can we consider what is happening in Al-Aqsa Mosque a religious war against Islam, since he was saying that this is not a war against Palestinians only, but all the Muslims?
I don't like to use these words. This is what the Zionists want you to believe. The Zionists want you to believe that this is the end of days religious war, that this is the war that they have to fight in order for the second coming of Christ to come to earth. They have to liberate the Aqsa Mosque. From our point of view as Muslims, we know from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this location will always be in question. There will always be people that are trying to take Al-Aqsa Mosque from the true believers. And the test for believers will always be whether to keep Al-Aqsa or to be pushed out of it. Now, for the Palestinian cause, for the Muslim cause, we all have to unite in supporting the Palestinians, the Muslims in this month, for one reason, for humanitarian reasons, for Islamic reasons, for Arab reasons, just because they are people who are civilians who have no way of defending themselves, and that they are being oppressed and being killed by forces that are organized, whether it's militia or whether it's organized army forces by an occupying force. We need to be supporting this, whether it is a religious war or whether it's the end of time or whether it's just a normal event in every day. As I can see on your screen, a lot of heavy artillery has been used inside a historical location that holds a big value in the hearts of Muslims, in the hearts of humanity, in the hearts of the Arab nations. It can very well escalate to a full-blown holy war, religious war, but this is not something for the benefit of the Aqsa Mosque or for the benefit of the peace in the world. Muslims are 1.7 billion people. You cannot fight 1.7 billion people with the means that are currently happening, and it's not to the benefit of anyone on earth for this to turn into a religious conflict. And this, again, I say, this is what the Zionists want, this is what they advocate for, and that's why they always escalate in the months of Ramadan.
Very good indeed. Mr. Abu Zoom, coming to you back, into consideration, do you really agree with what Mr. Farouk is saying, that he's not like in the word of this is war against religion, Islam religion, though we all know that the Zionist entity, their first and principle, their first goal is to fight all what is belonging to Islam. This is first. Secondly, if we take into consideration what have been said by the ambassador to Algiers, Mr. Faiz Abu Aita, he's saying that they are trying to defile Muslims' holy site. What do you represent in this word?
Actually, I clearly agree with you, honorable guest, but we'd like to mention that Israel is trying to balance its own interests, by the way. From one side, they are trying to have a proper control on the Palestinian historical places and even holy places, throughout making and fueling a kind of religious war against Palestinians and against all Muslims, by the way, throughout getting benefits from the wave of the Israeli normalization that has been done with Arab states. This is from one side. From other side, they are trying even to give the Palestinian holy places a sense of the Judaism generally, like how they are trying to prove for the international world that these places will sooner or later will gradually, in a very soft way, to be later turned to be one of the Jewish holy sites, not just for Muslims. They are now trying to indicate for the international community that the Jews have the right in order to perform their praise inside this place in comparison and similarly to Palestinians. But the international world, the entire world, clearly understand that this place is only for Muslims, because our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has prayed in this place, has ascended to the sky, and even they are trying as much as possible to efface the truth throughout the generation, depending on the base that the elderly people will die, the young will forget. They are trying as much as possible even to test the international and public mood regarding what is happening in Jerusalem. Actually, the wave of stormings that has been made in Al-Aqsa Mosque has been met with a worldwide and international condemnation and rejection. Actually, a lot of Arab prime ministers and foreign ministers expressed their anger and outrage from what is happening inside the holy places, and even international mediators and regional actors expressed their outrage and condemnation for the Israeli attempts in order to change and even to spark tension in the holy places, and they are calling them to stop their violations and to put limitations for the Israeli settlers' stormings of Al-Aqsa Mosque. But in spite of all these calls, in spite of all efforts that have been made in order to maintain the current situation, the Israeli paparism generally is revealing and revealing more. They are trying to give them a culture that they ignore the demands generally, and they are trying to pass their schemes, thinking that the international community now won't really do anything for Palestinians, and Palestinians that are now weak, they cannot really defend their rights, and throughout having different kinds of stormings and different kinds of military operations, they can really subjugate Palestinians and make them and force them to accept their demands. But actually, since the formation of the last Israeli hardline government, the rate of resistance and the act of resistance have been incredibly increased in order to fight and even to confront the Israeli violations. If you can properly follow the recent statistics released by human rights organization, you will find out that the number of Palestinians who were killed during the formation, since the formation of the last Israeli government, has jumped more than 200 Palestinians. Actually, this is unprecedented rate of murders and even injuring that happened to Palestinians.
Thank
so
you,
Palestinians
Mr.
now can trying as much as possible to put limitations to the Israeli occupation stormings.
Thank you so much for this explanation. I'm sorry to cut your train of thought, but we have to move to another point to be discussed. Still with the Palestinian ambassador, also, he emphasized the importance of providing support to the Palestinian people and their just cause, calling on Arab and Muslim nations to follow the Algeria suit, which was among the first countries to back the Palestinian issue.
We call on our brothers to provide support to our families and people, especially in Al-Quds. The entire Palestinian people needs this support to strengthen its steadfast position. We highly appreciate the position of our brothers in Algeria, who were among the first countries in expressing their position and support for the Palestinian people and its legitimate rights. A couple of days ago, President Tebboune said that the Palestinian cause is a central cause for the Algerian people.
Now I'm joined by Mustafa Ragab, chair of the Egyptian Association in Europe from Egypt. Mr. Mustafa, the Arab League convened on Wednesday an emergency meeting at the request of Jordan to look into the incursion of the Zionist forces into Al-Aqsa Mosque. Do you think that the outcome of this meeting will bring an end or at least a pause to this daily violation by the Zionist occupation?
Well, we have seen in the past so many attempts from the Arab League and from Arab countries. It's all past now. These people will never, ever achieve anything. Their soft action is actually the main reason for encouraging the Israelis of carrying on all this aggression against the Palestinian. And come especially in this holy month, they are just showing the world we can do whatever we want. It's about time now for the international community, not the Arab world, for the international community to do all what they can to support those poor people at this time, at this holy month, to stop them from practicing, to do what they're doing to them. This is absolutely a shame on the whole of the world. We talk a lot about peace, we talk a lot about a lot of lovely things, but when we see what they're doing around the world, this is absolutely disgusting. I don't have any hope on the Arab League or the Arab countries. But I didn't see any of them summoning the Israeli ambassadors and telling him this is unacceptable, you have to immediately change what you're doing. But having a conference and condemning the work, we're sick of that. It's been happening so many times and no action was taken. The Israelis actually don't see that anyone can stop them from doing what they're doing. Unless we see demonstration all over the world against the Israeli embassies in all the world to tell them this is unacceptable. Some big action need to be taken. We've seen a lot of condemnation in the past. We've seen a lot of things, but no result. Nothing has been achieved. Nothing's been happening. Every now and then, the Israeli forces will do criminal work, criminal act against our people. And let me tell you something. We're only seeing terrorist acts as a result of this. When those people see what happened to them and the whole world is just watching, doing nothing, what are you expecting from them? What are you expecting them to do? What are you expecting their supporters to do when they see the world is doing nothing towards them? This is where you see terrorist act happening all over the world. This is a result. I'm not making a threat. I'm not telling the people that be careful what you're doing. But this is true. We've seen terrorism since 1967 when the Israeli done what they done in Palestine, and the support they having from the United States, the support they having from a lot of other countries all over the world, it's just no stopping for them. So we're going to sit down and watch this. And are we going to take action? Are the whole world going to take action? Are we going to see some action in Europe? Are we going to see some action? As a matter of fact, there is a lot of supporters for the Palestinian cause, but this is not resulting in any action, any positive action. This is happening every single day in Israel. And even when you get some people to stand against, people who are not Arab, people who are not Muslim, let's not forget that the Israeli does action against the Christian in Palestine, not just the Muslims. They are doing whatever, killing children, slaughtering people unarmed. What we're watching there is a material for breeding terrorism.
Quite understand.
Do we understand that? Do we realize that? It's so dangerous what's happening here. Unless we see some strong action from the international community. Nothing will stop the Israelis because they are supported by the most powerful country in the world, the United States.
Very good points you have raised, Mr. Mustafa. It's quite understood that if someone can read between the lines what Mr. Mustafa has stated, is that actions speaks louder than words. So, Mr. Farouk, do you really agree that with what Mr. Mustafa has just said? He said that it's not time for meeting and keep saying words and condemning. We have to do something. What kind of things that we should provide to Palestinians in this particular time?
I believe this is the time for civilian actions, not for government condemning or for government actions or for calling to action by government entities that have shown failure after another over the last. I heard your guest refer to 1967. Actually, since 1948. The international community has failed the Palestinian struggle against the Israeli entity and the Israeli existence on its land. Just like the international community has failed the Arabs and Muslims struggle against their occupiers all throughout history. And maybe Algeria, which hosts us on their channel on their air now, has given us all a lesson in how to struggle after giving 1 million martyrs. So we may have to start learning from our Algerian ancestors and from our Algerian forefathers how to struggle against the occupation, because I don't believe that any call for action, any United Nations resolution, any Arab League resolution is going to result in anything. Today, this is a confrontation that is happening for every Muslim, for every human, for every Arab, face to face. They are facing it on the media. They know what is happening. They can see the smoke. They can see the fire inside the third holiest location in their religion. What are you going to do about it? This is the question that is in front of every human being on earth right now. We have to act, us as civilians, as singular people, each one of us, if we do our part and support the Palestinian cause by raising awareness, by speaking about it, by talking about the issue, by sharing the news of the issue, by supporting the Palestinians who are in Jerusalem at the moment, in Al-Aqsa, in Al-Quds at the moment, supporting them as much as possible, just by being with them, just by talking to them, just by buying from them, just by sending them our support one way or another. Depending on government organizations, I believe is not going to result in anything. And we don't have to wait long. We will not have to wait long, because the number of victims that are being victimized by the radicals, by the racists, by the fanatics in the Jewish side is increasing. And the anger in the Arab streets is increasing. And very, very soon we will see the revolution to liberate Palestine, the revolution to liberate Aqsa, the revolution to liberate Al-Quds will not start in Jerusalem, will not start in Tel Aviv, will not start in the cities of Palestine. No, it will start in Sudan. It will start in Khartoum. It will start in Algeria. It will start also in Egypt, in Cairo, in every part of the Muslim world, but in every part of the globe. Simply because it is a human situation, not a religion situation, not a race situation. Humans are being killed while worshiping. Civilians are being shot while worshiping. There's absolutely no justification to what is happening. And oppression will always fail, and we will always have a reaction, no matter how late it goes.
Very good indeed. Coming to you, Mr. Tariq Abu Azoum, the official spokesman for the Palestinian presidency said at the beginning of this week that the fabricated Zionist escalation is aimed at escalating tensions and dragging the situation into violence in the blessed month. What do you think this escalation intended by the occupier precisely started during the last few couple of days? And to some extent, do you agree with what our both guests have just stated, that actions speak louder than words?
Okay, generally, the Palestinian presidency was really honest in expressing that they are trying to escalate the situation in the Palestinian holy places, simply because they'd like in the first position, they are really trying to vilify and to slander the value of the holy month of Ramadan. They are trying to demonize the value of the Islamic month of rituals for Muslims in order to give a better excuse and to justify the actions in the eyes of the international communities and their supporters, generally, and delays. And the Israeli occupation is trying to change the conditions of Al-Aqsa Mosque by expressing and justifying the actions, and they are doing this under groundless justifications. Like, we are trying to provide a very tranquil environment of worshipping for Palestinians. But you can see now in the video presented in front of me, you can see like even Muslims, they are peacefully, they are disarmed, they are just praying and performing their praise, and you can probably how they really disrespect the rituals of the Muslims and even for the Palestinian worshippers generally. So actually, throughout these actions, we clearly can agree with our honorable guests that the occupation is only understand the language of action, the language of movements properly, not just language of expressing your condemnation or even start giving useless and unfruitful statements released by Arab states. We can clearly need to support Palestinians and to try as much as possible to support them in different ways, starting from words, from humanitarian aid, from even having different kind of diplomatic ties with Palestinians, and even they are trying. The Arab states must generally having a kind of intensifying the actions in order to put limitations and to put restrictions on the Israeli actions and violations. And we probably need the international community to stop condemning just the Israeli actions, but rather than to impose restrictions to put an end for the Israeli crimes. Probably when we can see that there is something that happened against the occupation and a resistance of act that really destroyed the occupation, you can probably see that the international community hurry and rushes just for putting excuses and to support the Israeli right to defend itself. But now look to Muslims, look to Palestinians inside the holy places of Al-Aqsa Mosque. You can probably see that the percentage of destruction, the ramifications that could really spill over the region, and we can clearly think that this wave of stormings will have its aftermath, serious aftermaths, or just not on the Palestinians, even going to be on the entire region. So we'd like little bit to intensify our actions to be little bit practical, not to be just only theoretical.
We all, I believe, share the same point. Now, moving on to discuss probably the last point in this show, Mr. Faiz, who is the ambassador to Algiers, pointed out also to the double standard policy adopted by the international community. Let's tackle this clip.
We call on the international community to stop its double standard policy and to stop turning a blind eye to the crimes of the Zionist occupation. Until when the world's hands will remain tied? Until when it will only reject and denounce what the occupation perpetrates?
Mr. Mustafa Ragab, coming to you. After the cover was unveiled about the extremist Zionist government, the world became fully aware of the ideology of this occupier who does not respect human rights or worship rights. What is expected today from the international community to deter these Zionist violations?
Well, we are sure now that the Israeli government doesn't care whatsoever about human rights organization, and they have done that so many times. They stuck two fingers up to them anytime they make any reports about human rights in Israel. It is only the international community now that have the power. I dream of seeing some brave governments kicking out the Israeli ambassadors and telling them this is not acceptable. I dream of seeing a lot of action from the governments, but this is a dream. It won't happen. So the international community have all the power now by, one, boycotting buying all the Israeli products anywhere in the world, two, stopping all the tourists, or making a campaign to make the tourists aware that every penny they put in the Israeli government pocket is empowering them to do what they're doing. So stop the tourists going to Israel, boycotting all the products that are produced by Israel, going to all the... we have to define the difference between Judaism and Zionist. Zionist is what they're doing in Israel. So we have to lobby. There is a lot of Jewish community all over the world who believe in the Palestinian cause. So we have to lobby those people and make more of them and make them speak loudly against what's happening in Israel. This is one very important thing. And there is, in the UK, in America, there is a lot of Jewish community that believe in the Palestinian cause. So we have to make this a lot stronger. We have to get the international community. The governments are hopeless. They are just going to condemn and issue some statements. And in time, this will all die and until some other action happened by the Zionists in Israel. What is happening at that time of the years is absolutely disgusting. That is a message to the whole world from the Israeli government. They do not care. Nothing will stop them from doing anything. You know, this happening all the time. And we've seen that some people can go mad, can lose their mind, can go and act themselves because there is no one else in the world is acting. We have to stop that. There has to be a stop. There has to be a brainstorm from some highly influential people to sit together and come with a plan. I say some ideas, other people say ideas, but all this has to come with some group of people who say, right, we come with this plan to stop the Israeli people, to stop the Zionists doing their acts. This is what I love to see, because relying on governments, it has proven since 48 until today that governments are useless. There is no action. We can see in the Gulf the relationship growing between the Israeli government and the Gulf countries. I was shocked to see the Israeli ambassador have got the red carpet from the plane to his car. That's an ambassador, not a president. So when you're giving this message, and in the following day, you see what's happening in Israel, do they care? Will they really care? They're getting top VRP treatment in the Arab countries, and then they turn up and do what they're doing. Have any of those countries come and say, hold on a minute, this is unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Mustafa. I'm sorry to cut your train of thought. Just a couple of minutes left for us to conclude this show. Mr. Farouk, as I was raised, I have one question in my mind. What is special about Zionist entity? I mean, what kind of leverage they have on the world? Why no one can hold them responsible for their actions? I believe I do not hear you, Mr. Farouk. We will try to get in touch with... Do you hear me, Mr. Farouk?
Yeah, I hear you clearly.
So,
I said this is a very, very interesting and important question. What is the leverage Zionist entities have on the world? They control the money. They control the banks, therefore they control the money. They also, in the beginning of the Zionist movement, and this is well known and well discussed in the memoirs of different Jewish and Zionist politicians, how they used what they refer to as honey traps, and that is using sexual material, using blackmail material to leverage different politicians in different countries to further their cause. This started in America in the 50s, in the 30s, in the 40s of last century, in order to guarantee that the declaration of a Jewish state on Palestinian land is accepted. They used money, they used debt, they used the famous promise by the government of England at the time, the Balfour Promise. This was bought by money. This is the leverage that causes them to now, or causes us as civilians today, to not trust the decisions of the governments that are currently in peace accords or in peace agreements with the Israeli entity or with the Zionist entity, simply because we know that as soon as a peace agreement has been signed, this means that more Palestinians will die, more Muslim blood will be shed, rather than more land or anything can be gained by our governments, or any value of any peace agreement can be realized by the Palestinian side. This is the reason we do not trust any peace agreement or any peace negotiations between the Israeli side and any of the current governments. Yeah, I use, for example, the current interim government in Sudan entering into a peace agreement with the Israeli side. This means that Sudanese will not be able to express their opinion about what's happening to their brothers in Palestine. The leverage they used in Sudan was a leverage of international sanctions.
To cut your train of thought, Mr. Farouk, but we have reached the limited time for our show. Mr. Farouk Kasibawi from New Zealand, Mr. Tariq Abu Azzoum from Palestine, and also Mr. Mustafa Ragab from London. Thank you ever so much for taking part in our debate. And for more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself. And good night.